title is, Has Islamic Economics Delivered on Its Promises? So, to understand what is the purpose of economics, what is the promise? Well, one of the purposes is to provide policy advice. So, in that sense, conventional economics has been a failure. The most dramatic instance of that is the global financial crisis, where they failed to predict or to provide correct policy advice after it happened. But Islamic economics also suffers from the same problem. They have not been able to provide good policy advice to the Islamic world. Conventional economics, which was implemented and enforced by the World Bank and the IMF, failed to deliver a single case of economic transformation, even though these policies were actually enforced by the World Bank around the world. And there is a book by World Bank itself which acknowledges this failure. Oh, okay. So, the conventional economic theory has not been able to deliver even one case of economic transformation. But communist Russia, China, also the East Asian countries, they achieved economic transformation. And there is acknowledgement by people who have studied this, that none of this was based on, these economic transformations were based on ignoring and rejecting conventional advice. But we can say also the same thing about Islamic economics, that it has failed to provide transformation for any of the countries. Any of the Islamic countries we have not. So that's one measure by which Islamic economics has not delivered on its promises. There's another measure. Over the past 3 decades, a number of new disciplines or alternatives for economics have emerged, and they have delivered. So there is behavioral economics, and they are currently providing policy advice to governments all over the world to change behavior in desirable directions. It's called nudge. There is poverty economics started by Duflo and Banerjee, and they have multi-million-dollar programs running all around the world, and with promises to end poverty. They have been partly successful and part failures. But anyway, they have made an impact on real world. There's environmental economics, which is of course a multi-billion-dollar issue because of the climate crisis. And environmental economics is again very different from and not within the scope of modern economics as it is currently taught. These are a big success. Then there is also evolutionary economics, which has very strong explanatory power about how economies evolve. And this is not a subject which is part of conventional for reasons I'll discuss. There is agent-based models, computational economics. And again, this successfully analyzes complex systems. Modern economy is a complex system. The conventional economics does not have the mathematical capability to deal with a complex system, because they treat all the agents as the same. Then there is modern monetary theory, which has explanation of modern system, and it has 3 goals: 0 inflation, 0 interest, and 0 unemployment. And all of these are Islamic goals, and modern monetary theory provides a theory and an explanation and a policy to achieve these. Again, we don't have anything comparable within Islamic economics. So the question arises, why has Islamic economics failed to deliver? And I have given an explanation of this in my paper on the crisis in Islamic economics, which has also been translated in Turkish. Briefly speaking, modern economics arose after the rejection of God and afterlife and judgment. So it's based on the idea that the goal of life is to maximize pleasure. This is written, this is the first principle of modern economics. The goal of life for every human being, every rational human being, those people who don't do this are irrational, like we Muslims are irrational because we believe in God. So this means that man is just another kind of animal. We live in a jungle of cutthroat competition, and there is only one morality, and that is the survival of the fittest. So the world is governed by, society is built on greed, competition, and individualism. Islam is based on generosity, cooperation, and social responsibility. So in all dimensions, it's opposite. So now, the problem with Islamic economics is that it has attempted to merge these two. They have said that let's take modern economics and adapt it. And that cannot be successful. You cannot mix two opposites. I will explain later why this approach has been developed. So, only about 1 month ago, I've been criticizing conventional economics for a long time. Rajab Hoja has been criticizing me for criticizing economics. But over the 20 years, I have only recently, only in the last month, I have put together all of these pieces into a coherent theoretical framework. And I have started writing this textbook on third generation Islamic economics. And there is a link provided here which gives you the home page and whatever material currently exists on it, an outline and some chapters. So the basic place where we can start building a new theory is from human behavior. So first there is this survey of mine which explains, which just documents the massive amount of empirical evidence against the economic theory which approach to human behavior. So, and why did the economists accept such a theory, such a defective theory of human behavior? That's because they wanted to be scientific. And to be scientific means that, in their view, to be scientific means that you only look at the observable factors, so you don't look at inside the human being. And so they take a mathematical, axiomatic approach, which means that the behavior of you and me can be reduced to a mathematical formula. And that has proven to be a failure. So we reject this external approach, and we start by an internal subjective approach, supposedly unscientific. So we say that self-knowledge is the key to human behavior. I know who I am, and this has been ancient wisdom across many different wisdom traditions. So Aristotle said that to know yourself is the beginning of wisdom. And there's a saying that man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbuh. But this is said to be hadith, but it's actually a Sufi saying, probably from Ibn Arabi. So this is the wisdom. And basically, if we know ourselves as human beings, this leads to a much better, much more powerful theory of human behavior. And this can do a better job than behavioral economics and experimental economics, even though these two fields are now very famous and they are being used to make policy. We can improve upon them. So, so one insight is that we should base our theory of human behavior on self-knowledge. The second insight is that societies are continuously evolving, and this is our lived experience. As we live, we notice that the society we live in is changing in many different ways. This means that modern economics theory of equilibrium must be rejected. Equilibrium is a situation where society does not change. Ibn Khaldun studied the evolution of societies in time from youth to maturity to luxury and decline. And so because we are going to change the intellectual tradition. We are not going to follow the Western intellectual tradition. Even the word social science, the science part of it refers to a certain intellectual tradition which we must reject if we want to study human society. And so it's useful to name it after Ibn Khaldun, Ulumul Umran. Many other people have adopted this perspective as well. So one of the things is that society is continuously changing, so we want to study the process of social change. The other thing is that economics, politics, society, environment, all four dimensions are linked, and you cannot study them in isolation. So in particular, economic theory cannot be studied in isolation from the other factors. So these two are distinguishing features. So since societies are composed of human beings, so if we have a bad theory of human behavior, we have a bad social science. And so if we create a correct theory of human behavior, we can rebuild the entire body of social sciences from start. And Recep Şentürk has developed multiplex theories of human behavior. I also have some insights into this, but basically one of the things that I want to say is that the idea of science is, which is misunderstood in the West, but according to their understanding, science is about external observable behavior. So they do not investigate the spirit, the heart, the nafs, and all the internal dimensions of man. And because of this, they can never arrive at a valid theory of behavior. So even within economics, there is orthodoxy, there is heterodoxy, there are many different schools of thought, but none of them can arrive at this point. So when we start with a real theory of human behavior, we can really rebuild the social sciences, and the social sciences is the key to rebuild our own society. The theory provides the framework for the society that you build. So if you have the wrong theory, you can never build the right society. So we understand that if societies are evolving, then social theories must co-evolve. They must evolve alongside society. So in chapter 2 of my textbook, I explain how Western economic theory evolved. And basically, it was the result of centuries of religious wars in Europe. Because centuries of religious wars between Protestants and Catholics led the Europeans to realize that Christianity cannot be used as the basis to build a peaceful society. This is very different from the Islamic historical experience. So they said, okay, let's get rid of religion, because religion just leads to wars. And so they built a secular society, and these secular societies are built on organizing principles which are antithetical to Islam. One of these is that Hobbes, the first political scientist, said that we cannot rely on internal morality, because internal morality comes from Christianity, so let's replace it by the rule of law. So the government is now going to enforce morality. And today, our Islamists have also accepted this idea, and they want to enforce the Sharia from the outside, when in fact the Sharia is a state of the heart, a state of compliance of the heart, the khushu and khuzu. That is the Sharia. The Sharia begins in the heart. It's not enforced. You cannot enforce Iman from the outside. So that eventually led to the modern economics, which is blind to the nature of man. Now, what happened to Islamic economics? This has also evolved with time. The first generation, in the beginning of 20th century, the economics was, the Islamic world was colonized, and in the 1950s, freedom from political rule was achieved, and the first generation of Islamic economics was revolutionary. It said that Islamic economics provides an alternative to capitalism and socialism and communism. But this goal was not achieved in the 1950s. In the 1970s, the Islamic economists said that political Islam has failed. We cannot capture control, so instead of replacing capital, instead of rejecting capitalism and replacing it with an Islamic system, let's just take capitalism and modify it to be Islamic. So that is the birth of second generation of Islamic economics. Again, it evolved due to historical circumstances. But this idea has failed. Okay, so this idea also failed, and that led to the birth of the second generation. For 3 decades, conventional economics was tried, but it has not been able to produce any new ideas. So the third generation comes from rejecting second generation, and from historical experience that the second generation did not actually succeed in producing anything. There are some useful insights that were learned and absorbed. So now there's a little time left, but what I would like to end with is to say that all of the 6 successful alternatives that I mentioned on the first page, which are all partial insights, and they all come from Islamic perspective. So if we adopt an Islamic perspective and we study economics from the Islamic point of view, we can improve on behavioral economics, we can do better than poverty economics, we can do better than environmental economics, we can improve upon evolutionary economics by using our ulumul imran. Agent-based models are natural for Islamic economics because Allah Ta'ala says, inna sa'yakum la shatta, meaning different people have different goals. Islamic economics modern economics assumes that everyone has the same goal, to maximize pleasure. That's wrong. So an MMT, modern monetary theory, it says that we should aim for 0 unemployment, 0 inflation, and 0 interest rates. These are goals aligned with Islamic ideals. And so all of these things can be incorporated into a single framework coming from Islamic perspective. Okay, so that's it. Thank you.